as I've been working in the church and also working in a Christian university, I, I realized that many of my students and many of the people in the congregation had what I would compare to a cultural concussion. And what I mean by that was when I was growing up, I liked to wakeboard, and one day I was wakeboarding and I hit really hard, and I kind of I remember this very just kind of fragmented, but when as I got back into the boat, I kept asking my older brother, "What time is it?" And he would tell me, and about 30 seconds later, I'd say, "What time is it?" And then about 15 seconds later, I'd say, "What time is it?" And then they quickly rushed me to the hospital, and I kept asking them, "What time is it?" And as I was doing this, there was this kind of exchange as they were getting frustrated and I was getting frustrated because we knew something wasn't quite right. And as I talk to people about our cultural moment right now, there's this kind of frustration because many people don't kind of understand what time is, what's going on culturally right now. And so when they begin to try to, oftentimes they don't even try to understand, but they're reaching for something. They're reaching, as I was, by asking the question, "What time is it?" They're trying to get some kind of stability in this kind of cultural moment. And as they're doing that, they take one of several different routes in conversations with their unbelieving friends. They just get frustrated at them because they think you're ruining the culture, or they get frustrated that they can't communicate to them. And what I realized is I needed to write a book that helped people understand what time is it culturally, so they can understand this cultural moment, but then translate that in a way that they can actually have meaningful, significant conversations. I wanted to write a book that would build up the church, that I could hand to people in my church and say, "This is going to help you talk to others about your faith and to engage them with where they're at." I teach this both at a university level and a PhD level. I teach this in the local church, and then I have lots of conversations with people who are either believers struggling with their own doubts or people who think that believers are crazy for believing this story about Jesus. The book's divided into 3 sections. The first section is what I would call is a better story about apologetics. And what I mean about a better story about apologetics is there's some accounts that say we don't need apologetics, we just need to give them the gospel. And I think that is missing, that we live in a post-Christian society and we can't just assume the gospel. We can't assume that all we got to do is give them the gospel and walk away. On the other hand, I would say there's certain approaches to apologetics that just really they don't transfer very good to everyday conversations. They don't transfer well to preaching. And so what I'm offering in the first section of the book is this way to think about apologetics as a way to engage people over the gospel. This isn't about winning an argument primarily. This is about conversion. And you can win an argument sometimes, but the person's not just walks away with their hands in the air because they still don't care. And so I'm wanting to give a way to think about conversations, taking what I see as the best from within the apologetic tradition. Part 2 of the book says, okay, how does this actually work? How can it work given the cultural narratives of our day? How does the Christian gospel speak to that? How can we speak to that? And so what I do there is I take certain things that I would argue people just have to have if they're human. Morality. You can deny morality, but as soon as someone cuts you off, you're going to say that was wrong. I mean, very quickly, no matter what people say theoretically, they're going to have a morality and they're going to live that out. But there's other things. Beauty. We sense that. Experientially, we sense beauty. We in our culture today, human rights, many times people would say, yes, of course you have human rights. And so, okay, let's take that and let's begin that conversation around these things that are pretty much basic across our culture today. And how do we have a conversation that gets to the gospel? So that's the second part of the book. The final part of the book says there's various ways people, as you're talking, will say, yeah, that would be nice. That would be nice if that's true. I see what you're saying, but I can't believe that story, that Christian story, because it's not a good story. you have suffering in the world. Because that would be a good story if it was true, but it can't be true because it just doesn't bear out in history. People don't get up from the dead; they don't rise from the dead. And so that really deals with objections to the story and how do we engage people once they maybe say, yes, I wish I could believe that, but, and that helps you talk to them, engage with them over that but, and say, no, well, actually, there's reasons you can. It's not just wish fulfillment, but there's good reasons you should believe this story. One of the things that is unique about this book is it seeks to not simply give kind of rules for apologetics or an overly tight system. I don't think that's how conversations work, but a way. And so a way to enter in, a mode that you enter in to have these conversations. Another way that this is unique is that it seeks to not only approach people as rational beings, but people who imagine and people who love. And so I don't think we're primarily driven by simply kind of just the facts, although I think facts are important, truth's important, but people are often, their eyes are opened to the truth because of beauty, because something in their imagination is sparked. And so learning how to have conversations, not imagining that people are just this kind of these logic chopping machines, but treating people as holistic beings. And then how do we actually engage these holistic image bearers of God that stand in front of us? So one of the things that sometimes churches do is they think about apologetics training over here or evangelistic training over here, and they think about spiritual disciplines over here. And both, most evangelical churches are going to say both are important. What I actually see is these things should come together. And so as we're thinking about the gospel and how the gospel transforms us, how the gospel is a better story, one of the things we have to do for people, what we have to do as Christians is say, how am I actually living off of secular scripts? How is the gospel a better story? And in what ways is it a better story? Like, we need to constantly be preaching that to ourselves, talking to each other about it, making sure that we're not being taken by cultural narratives. And what happens is as you learn to do that for your own holiness, for your own sanctification, so that we're loving the right things, what happens is if you're doing that, all of a sudden when you jump into a conversation with somebody, you're already thinking along those terms because they're living in the same cultural waters than you are in many ways. And so you're able to take the stories of the culture and say, let's compare this with the Christian story. Try on your story. Okay, how's that going for you? Now let's try on the Christian story and see how it actually makes better sense. It's actually livable. And in many ways, I'd say it's more rational as well. I encourage you to get telling a better story. If you want to talk to your unbelieving friends about Christ, if you're a preacher, if you're a communicator, and you're wanting to connect the gospel with the objections, with the secular cultures that people are living out, and telling a better story is going to help you get to the gospel and tell the story of Christ as the true better story.